Show me by raising your hand who's ever heard of the word copyright? Who's ever heard of the word infringement? Who's ever heard of the word plagiarism? Who's ever heard of the word license? Well, today I'm going to teach you about these terms. For the ones of you who've never heard these terms, I hope you'll leave with the understanding of them. For those of you who have already heard these terms, I hope to give you even a better understanding of them. So, let's get started.
I think we should use Wordle to make pictures for poetry. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea.
Mr. Smith, should we use Wordle to make poetry pictures today? Yes, I think that's a great idea. I'll go get the laptops. Hey, why didn't you tell him that? That was my idea.
It's not that big of a deal, is it? We're still gonna have fun. No harm, no foul.
It hurts my feelings.
So, show me by raising your hand. Has anyone ever had an incident happen like that to you? Have you ever had an idea that someone else uses and says it's their own? I remember one time when I was in 4th grade like you, and my friend and I were talking about our science fair projects. I told her I had the idea to make a ramp for my hamster to help her get up to her house easier. The next day, I heard my friend telling our teacher the idea I had told her. The worst part was my friend was acting like the idea was hers when it was mine. That's not fair, is it? It's not only not fair, but in a lot of instances, it's against the law. Today I'm going to talk to you about these laws. So when people have an original idea, one that they were the first to think of, or a picture that they drew that they thought of all on their own, they oftentimes get a copyright so that everyone knows that they thought of their idea first and no one else can use it and get the credit. To get a copyright, they must fill out official paperwork. Once they get this paperwork, people can't copy their idea without giving the person who made it credit. This copyright comes with copyright laws that protect their ideas as well. So there's copyright that protects the people and copyright law that makes sure that the people who created things are getting the credit. There are a lot of different types of ideas and people that are protected by these laws. Authors are protected. Their books, stories, poems, and graphic novels can't be copied. So I can't go write a book about a boy named Harry that's a wizard and then write a book on my own about it and pretend like the idea was mine because the idea has already been done by the author. Musicians are protected. Their musical work, like songs and words like you hear on the radio. I can't write a song and then I can't listen to a song and then sing it in a recording and pretend like it's my song and make money for it. Dancers are protected, so like dance teachers who teach their students a dance and they go to competition. Some of you might do that. They might go to the competition and do the dance, and then I can't watch that dance and then teach it to my students and pretend like I made up those dance moves and then my students win awards for the performance. That would be copying them. It's not fair. Artists are protected. I can't go look at the Mona Lisa and go get a drawing, a board and draw my own Mona Lisa and pretend like that was my idea and, get money for that. Movie people, they can't take ideas of movies. And architects with buildings, their buildings are protected. You design a building, someone can't go and design your exact same building and pretend like it was their idea. There are lots more examples because copyright rules and laws are everywhere. So when someone copies someone's ideas, they break the copyright laws like we've been talking about. This is called copyright infringement. This is just a big word meaning you're breaking the rules of copyright. A good example of these is these two drawings that you see here on my screen. Does anyone recognize this drawing right here? A lot of you might recognize it because it's Starbucks and you might drink Starbucks, or your mom or your grandma or your friend or your babysitter, someone you've probably seen or at least looked out the window and you've seen Starbucks. Well, that's because it's a very common symbol. Well, if I look at this drawing over here, what do you notice about it? When I look at it, I notice they used the same color green, the same color black, the fonts are kind of similar, and the picture's kind of similar in a way, and the shape's just similar. Well, the person who did this in Korea did this on purpose. They did this because the company wanted people to see their symbol of their coffee shop and to associate it with Starbucks, because they wanted people to think that looked familiar, and they thought that might make them come into their coffee shop more. So they thought, well, people would see this maybe traveling and say, oh, there's a Starbucks, and they would want to go there and think the coffee was the same. Well, this is called copyright infringement because they're breaking the copyright rules. Another thing we're going to talk about is plagiarism. Plagiarism is dealt with when we come to copyright as well. Who's seen the movie Jumanji, the new one that they just came out? Well, if you haven't seen it, in the beginning of the movie, one of the characters gets in trouble for turning in a paper that his friend wrote. In the movie, the character was punished because this is plagiarism. Plagiarism was when an author's original idea is used in another's work. This is the same thing as copying someone else's work and pretending like it's your own. It can also happen as if you use an idea you saw in a movie and write a paper or story and pretend it's your own. It's just not fair. So in other words, plagiarism is copying something that's not your own and saying it's yours, and that's just not fair. This is a quote by Red Skeleton. He said, "Imitation isn't the sincerest form of flattery, it's plagiarism." And what that means is you copying something that someone else has done. People used to say that was flattery, like that's a comment, that's compliment that somebody copies what you did. But actually, it's not a compliment. It is plagiarism, and it's not fair. Now you'll notice on this, I used something that was someone else's, right? And I could have pretended like I'm the one who said it, but I wasn't the one. So I used quotation marks and I put his name because I gave him credit because it was his idea who said it, not mine. That is fair. So not only is plagiarism not honest, it can also get you in trouble. If you do plagiarism, if you plagiarize something in school, you can get a 0 on the assignment. In the movie Jumanji that we talked about before, that boy, he had to go to detention, and actually so did the boy that he copied from. In college, you can get suspended or dismissed from school. They can say, you can't go to college anymore because you copied, and that wasn't fair. At work, in the work world, same thing can happen. You can have to pay fines, or you can get fired. You can lose your job for plagiarizing. So, is there any time that you're able to use someone's work in your own work? The answer is yes. You just have to make sure that you tell people reading, watching, looking, or listening to your work that some of the ideas aren't yours, and some of the words and pictures might not be your own. Just like the quote that I did a few slides back, I made sure that I said, this isn't what I thought to say. I found this from someone else, and I thought it was a great idea, so I used a little part of it in my paper. There's 4 ways that we're going to talk about that you can avoid plagiarizing things. And I'm just going to touch on them right now, but as we get into our research paper that we're going to do, we'll talk more about how to do these actual things. This is kind of just more of an introduction. So one way is you can cite. That means you can cite your source in your paper so that you're showing that it's not your idea, but you're using the words of someone else. Another thing you can do is create a reference list to show where your information came from. Another way is to paraphrase your information. This means you create a short summary of the information you used. You have to be careful not to use the same wording, but to create your own wording. Another way, which is the way I chose to do, is you could use quotations to show the reader the information you provided is not your own thoughts. Like I said, we'll talk more about this later, but this is just a little introduction to it. So, are you ever able to use something that has a copyright on it? The answer is yes. Many times copyrighted items have a license where they can be used. There are many types of licenses, but today we're going to talk about 2 of them. The other types are listed on your handout. They are Creative Commons and Public Domain. A Creative Commons license is one that allows anyone to use their work without asking permission. They have different rules, so you must check with them each time. A public domain license is one where the public owns the rights to the materials, so anyone can use it, but no one can own it. Now, one time the copyright laws are different are when it comes to use in an educational setting. What's an educational setting? Well, this right here is an educational setting. Anytime you're teaching others is an educational setting. Sometimes schools can use copyrighted materials that they are using for teaching. So if a teacher copies a page of a book to use in her classroom, that's okay. But if I were to buy a book and make copies of it and sell it to you, that's not fair. So it's not okay. So in closing, copyright is keeping it fair. I hope after our little lesson that you understand the words copyright, infringement, plagiarism, and license. And I can't wait to work on it with you more. Now, you see my last page here is my reference list. This is the things that I used when I was making this show for you, so I had to make sure to reference my stuff as well because I always want to be fair.